Welcome to episode 179 of the Left Behind Game Club. This week, we play Marvel Spider-Man. Let's get right into it. Flip, flip.
You're listening to the Left Behind Game Club.
Welcome to the Left Behind Game Club, our never-ending attempt to make sure that no game is left behind. I'm your host, Jacob McCourt, and today I have two friends with me. The first friend, you know her, you love her. Her name is Flora Marigold.
I do make a mean chicken curry.
Good. Always good. Always good. And our second friend on the show for the first time, Twitch streamer, content creator, it's Ella, a.k.a. Setobox. Hello!
Hello, everyone. It's so good to be here. Hi, guys.
Woo! Yeah, so you've been in the Left Behind Game Club community for a long time. Mm-hmm. You're a content creator in your own right. Tell the folks what you do, what you play, where you can be found.
So my name is Ella Setobox, like Jacob said. So I mostly play Overwatch with my friends on Twitch. Not professionally or anything. We're just a group of women who play Overwatch for fun. But I also play RPGs like Mass Effect, Kingdom Hearts, Borderlands, Bloodborne on stream. And I also play visual novels on stream. You can mostly find me on Twitch, but I'm also on Twitter, on Blue Sky, TikTok, where I post funny videos from my Twitch streams. It's pretty fun. On Twitter, or X, or whatever how it's called
we don't
day.
Call it X here.
Yeah,
Okay.
Twitter.
Okay, on Twitter, I am Seto Sweet Home. On TikTok, I am Setobox with the extra X at the end because someone took the name already. I'm mostly found there. I guess you can chat with me about video games, about Yakuza, about Overwatch,
Yes.
whatever.
And again, we can find all the links to what Seto is doing in the show notes of this episode. So if you want to, find them on TikTok or Twitter or Twitch, you can do that.
Yes.
Ella, what we like to do here on the show for folks who have never been on before, we run them through what we call the Gauntlet, which is a series of questions to get folks to understand your likes, your dislikes, and your takes on Mario. So with that, are you ready to run the Gauntlet?
Sure. Sounds fun.
All right. Flora, can you hit the gong for me?
The Gauntlet! Gong!
I love the extra flair. First question, have you ever pretended to be sick to get out of something important to play a video game?
Yes.
What game was it?
It was Skyrim.
Okay.
Yes. So I got into Skyrim late. It was a year after it came out. My folks in college were playing it, and my friends were playing it, and I got the game the night before class. There wasn't a test or anything, but I got so sucked into it that I was like, it was almost time for my class to start, and I was like, crap, I don't want to stop. I'm in the middle of a quest.
Oh.
So I send a quick email to my professor and say, hey, I caught a stomach bug. I'll be out all day. I'll come back tomorrow, hopefully. And she was so sympathetic. It made me feel bad.
I mean, you weren't lying about the bugs part. It is a Bethesda game, but still, that's really sweet that you got away with that.
Yes. Like I said, the professor was sympathetic, and I got through the quest.
Good.
Yay.
Excellent.
Yes.
What is your earliest gaming memory?
My earliest gaming memory was my dad bought my sister and I a Super Nintendo for Christmas once. And this is when I was around 5 years old. It was near the end of the Super Nintendo's life cycle, but it was big for me. And my sister, she was a teenager, and we were like, oh my god, we could finally play Mario, because we had been playing at our cousin's house. And it wasn't even Christmas when he bought it. It was just the middle of the year. And we spent hours that summer playing it. That was my earliest gaming memory. Playing Super Mario Brothers on the Super Nintendo.
Love. Is that the game that you've spent the most hours on? If not, what is the game you've spent the most hours on?
No. So I'm going to answer this question two ways.
Ooh.
So the game I have spent the most hours on is Overwatch. Sony told me how many hours I spent on it this year, and last year it was almost like 500 hours.
Whoa!
Yeah, so we're not counting that one, but the one I've actually spent the most hours on that's not a live service game was Persona 5, the original one. Cool. Yeah, that was 560 hours. And
whoa!
I was trying to get as much done as I could before I did the second playthrough, and so I was just reloading saves, going back like months. I have so many saves. I went back months in advance, like in the past. Yes. It got to the point where my friends were like, just finish the game. So,
do a second playthrough.
Yes. I still haven't started the second playthrough.
Did you ever finish Royal?
No, I haven't actually started it yet. And that was another thing my friends were like, why did you play the original and not Royal? And I was like, the original had been sitting on my shelf the longest, so.
Well, you've got another 5,000 hours there.
Yes.
A little bit of a tune-up, but hopefully you're in for the ride.
I have one more question, then Flora has one question for you. My last question is, what is your most controversial gaming opinion, or your hottest take as a gaming opinion?
Okay, my hottest take is not every game has to be 4K 120 FPS. Like, they don't have to have realistic graphics. The water doesn't need to be like, oh my goodness, this is real water. No, they don't have to be like that. And I guess one of the ways that, one of the biggest examples was when the Metal Gear Solid collection came out, the new one. People were honestly upset that the PS1 version of the game wasn't 4K and like 120 FPS. I'm just like, it's a PS1 game, guys. It's not even the Twin Snakes remaster. It is the PS1. It's gonna look horrible. So I don't understand why everyone wants every game to be 4K 120 FPS when there are games that are good that are 30 FPS and just 720p. They don't need to be lifelike and realistic to be good.
Yeah, and we're here to talk about Marvel Spider-Man today, which is a beautiful game.
Yes, it is very beautiful.
Now that you say that,
the last question.
Yeah, like we had Persona 5, which totally fit the example, and then we're going to talk about Spider-Man, which like is one of the most gorgeous games on modern hardware.
Yes.
So, I have actually two questions. I'm going to sneak an extra one in. Penultimate question for you is, have you ever had a crush on a video game character, and if so, who are you willing to gush about?
I have had one.
I know, like narrowing it down is probably like the hardest part of this question.
Yeah, two of them are from the same game, and they're kind of going to be cliche if I mention them.
Oh, that's okay.
Cliche away.
Well, because mostly everyone says them. So, Vincent Valentine from Final Fantasy VII.
Ooh.
And Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII. They were, and still are, one of my biggest crushes. I suffered through Dirge of Cerberus on the PS2 for Vincent Valentine when I was in high school.
that game's not good.
It was horrible, and I was just like, I'm doing this for Vincent. I'm doing this for Vincent Valentine. And Sephiroth, with Sephiroth, what can you say that hasn't been said before with Sephiroth?
That's kind of a classic choice.
Yeah, it's a classic choice. So, how I can't even start with Sephiroth because everyone has said that his long white hair,
Jacob.
He's dreamy.
Also, I've liked every single voice he's had. Not Lance Bass's one from Kingdom Hearts. since he's a special boss there. But the one they had in Crisis Core and Dissidia, and even the new Final Fantasy VII game, I'm just like, yes, that voice fits. I love it. It's everything.
So the last question I had for you, just out of curiosity, since you mentioned it earlier, do you have a favorite Yakuza game?
It has to be Zero.
Okay.
I'm still struggling through Zero because of how I made the decision to play it on hard. So I'm I am still struggling through it. But yes, out of the ones I've played so far, it has to be Zero. Dead Souls is charming because I bought it a few months ago. I'm playing through it. It's charming. It's bad, but it's
so bad that
charming.
It's good.
Yeah, so bad it's good. But it has to be Zero, then Kiwami, then 6. I haven't completed 7 yet, so.
Oh, you're in for a treat then. That's a good one.
Well, you survived the Gauntlet. Congratulations.
Woo.
Now we can talk about Marvel Spider-Man. But first, just a couple of favors. If you listen to the show and you love it, give us a review on your podcasting platform of choice, because that's how folks hear about podcasts, or send it to a friend, because that's helpful. And you can follow us on Twitter. We will not call it X, at Left Behind Club. That's when we announce the next games that we're playing, which in this case, Tease might be Super Metroid, but you will hear from us soon on that. Let's intro the game. Today we're talking about Marvel Spider-Man, developed by Insomniac, published by Sony Interactive Entertainment on PS4, PS5, and PC, originally released on September 7th of 2018. We start the show with our fast pitch, a one-sentence description of the game that we are about to talk about. Flora, I'm going to put you on the spot and say you have to go first this week.
Okay.
Give us a fast pitch.
I feel like Insomniac Spider-Man is, to me, what like Kingdom Hearts or even the Magic Kingdom is to Disney adults.
It's a snapshot of a millennial superhero trying to save the world and balance his life. It's going badly. Or that's 2 sentences.
Semicolon, it's going badly.
So badly, yes. Yeah. Semicolon, it's going badly.
Much better than what I was going to go with, and just say that this is the best Spider-Man experience that you can play since Spider-Man 2, the movie game on the original Xbox, PS2, and GameCube.
Oh my goodness. Not
to spoil the way I'm going to talk about this game, but that's how I feel. I'd love to know, before we jump in, how did everyone play? Because this one is available in a bunch of different ways. You can play it non-remastered on PS4. You can play it on PS5 in the remaster, and then on the PC as well. Flora, how'd you play this one?
PS4, small origin story to this. I Redboxed this game. And I don't know if Redbox is a Canadian thing or not, but
I know what that is.
Okay, so I rented the video game from like a little like gas station around the corner from my house, because I had so little faith in this game. I thought this was gonna like be just middling superhero fare, but I was a lifelong Spider-Man fan, so why not dabble over the weekend, right? That's how I played, is a rental copy.
Oh.
We love. Ella, did you rent it from a Redbox?
No, I actually bought it. I bought it a year after release. It was sitting on my shelf. So it's a PS4 copy of the Game of the Year edition, the one with the DLC and everything. So nice. I bought it from GameStop used for about $20. Yeah.
Love. I actually just looked at my shelf because I was like, hold on, did I buy a PS4 copy of this game and then rebuy it on PS5? I'm here to report that I did not double buy this game, so yay for me. We're making progress in this life. I bought it on PS5, the remaster that comes with Miles Morales, so I played it on PS5. And what they did is they ended up upscaling the graphics, making everything look great. They changed the face model for Peter Parker, which is a weird thing you can look at after the fact, but they wanted to make Peter look a little bit more like the traditional quintessential Peter Parker, so he looks different, the PS4 version versus the PS5 version. And then there's DualSense support in it. So one thing y'all probably missed out on is the ability to, like, you really feel in the triggers when you are like thwipping as Peter Parker.
I've played Miles Morales and Spider-Man 2 on PS5 DualSense controllers, so I at least experienced that version. I assume they fitted that backwards into the PS4, but if that was at release, that would have been so awesome.
Yeah, so you actually started with Miles Morales then?
No. I was just a little bit late with picking up Miles Morales. I've played all of the Spider-Man games from Insomniac, but the PS4 version was the 2018 version was the only one I played on my PS4.
Got it. Okay, understood. Would love to know, as a next question, what your experience is with the with not only the Spider-Man games but also Insomniac as a developer. I will quickly start and say that I'm a huge fan of Insomniac. Ratchet & Clank is like one of my favorite series, and so to see some of the shared DNA between this game and Ratchet & Clank games is sort of really cool, especially Rift Apart. There's some like really good shared technology that you can just tell that it's made by the same people, and it's probably running on the same engine. And then the Spider-Man games, I played Spider-Man 2, obviously. It's like probably one of my favorite superhero games ever made. But that's probably the only one I've played. I didn't play the like Neversoft PS1 games. I didn't really mess around with like any of the like Shattered Dimension, Web of Shadows, like that era. So this is really like my, second set of Spider-Man games. And I already loved it. I told you I loved it. So I'll say again, I loved it. Ella, what's your experience with Spider-Man and Insomniac?
So... yeah, my first Spider-Man game was the one on the PS2, the movie tie-in game. I rented it from the video store, and I played it through one weekend. It's great. Played I think there was one that came out for the third game, and it was horrible.
Yeah.
We don't talk about that one. But with Insomniac, they created Spyro the Dragon. I played through that entire trilogy on the PS1 as a kid. Ratchet & Clank, played that on the PS2, but I didn't play any of their PS3 games because I didn't get a PS3 until later, and I still haven't played the remake of the first game. That was some tie-in to the movie to Ratchet. Yep. I keep forgetting there's a Ratchet & Clank movie. So, and I started Sunset Overdrive, and I guess it didn't click with me. But that's all the Insomniac games I played. But every time I've played one of their games, they do 100%. So I haven't played a bad one. And like I said, Sunset Overdrive was just not for me.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think apart from like they made a Fuse on the 360 and PS3, I think that's like the only bad Insomniac game, and everything else is just really great.
Yeah. Didn't they do Resistance as well?
They did do Resistance 1 through 3. Man, just killers over there. Flora, same? You play a lot of Insomniac games?
Not actually. I didn't ever pick up like the Ratchet and Clank series for whatever reason. I was more of a Jack and Daxter girl. But when it comes to, did they do the PS3 titles? Like I want to say like Crack in Time and like some of the other ones. Insomniac.
Yeah, the Ratchet games.
Yes.
I picked up some of those in the PS3 generation, so I might have dabbled with some Insomniac titles unknowingly. That being said, the first conscious title that I've played by them is this game. So I have a copy of the Ratchet & Clank game for PS5, but haven't played it. I've played the 3 Spider-Man installments and the DLC for this game. So like from the Spider-Man content alone, a fan of their company, but not an extensive fan. And then like older Spider-Man titles, I grew up with the N64, PS1, whichever version, the original Spider-Man with like the Doc Ock Carnage villain at the end. I thought that game was the coolest thing in the universe. I remember like watching like my cousin play it over like Thanksgiving break or something, and just having my mind blown. I grew up like drawing Spider-Man comics like in little margins of my notebooks and stuff, like huge fan of the IP. But the only other game I had played up until this point was there was a Game Boy Color game, Revenge of the Sinister Six, I think is what it was called. Like a 2D little side scroller. Really fun memories with that game, but probably doesn't hold up now if I had to guess. And then the movie tie-in that Ella mentions with Toby Maguire doing his like deadpan delivery lines throughout the game. But there were some cool things in there and like some awesome cheat codes. Yes. You could be like the Green Goblin with unlimited bombs and stuff. So like that game is awesome. I stand that. I really wish I had played the Spider-Man 2 game because everyone says the web slinging mechanics in the second movie tie-in game are like the standard for the series leading up to this game.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's actually wild back in the day, like how if you think about that game was probably like 2003.
Yeah.
Like it's probably approaching 20 years old at this point. And to your point, like it just worked. The locomotion, the way it looked. These games just really take what that game did and like obviously crank it to 11.
Yeah, the second game had like the best web slinging up until this one, because the PS3 games, I didn't play them. My college roommate did. They were horrible. And they look clunky. And she even said they're clunky. It doesn't feel like the old ones from the PS2. So knowing that they had the best web slinging in a PS2 game and we didn't get any more until this one is wild.
Yeah, I think that like it went. Didn't it go from like Neversoft and then it went to Beanox, I believe, and like I think Shattered Dimensions is supposed to be okay, and then like it just goes down after that.
Yeah.
It's like Shattered Dimensions, Web of Shadows. There's like a 2099 game in there, I think, or like 2099's a character in it. I'm just really glad we have these games.
Yeah.
Agreed.
This game kicks off, just to share the setup of this one, and then we can talk about our feelings just out of the gate. This one, Peter Parker has already been Spider-Man for a few years. He has dated MJ, and it maybe hasn't gone the way that he liked. And he's working for Otto Octavius, and has already gone through school, so he's, in my mind, like in his early 20s. And you start the game with a fight against Kingpin, voiced by Travis Willingham. I don't know about y'all, but I think this is a bombastic, wonderful start to a game. One that I had no context on going in, but I was just like so happy to start this way.
Yeah,
I definitely liked the way this game started, where it throws you in and assumes you know quite a bit about this character and this universe and like the superpowers and even the villains. But if you don't, I don't think that this is a disorienting beginning to the game either. Like, there's a lot of visual setup that goes into the first moment that you're turned loose with the controller. And, like, just in the opening cutscene alone, which I was rewatching a little bit earlier today before the recording, like, just the artifacts on Peter's desk that are panned across, or, like, the information on his screen, or even the little newspaper clippings on his bulletin board, it tells you just a little bit about, like, oh, here's like 4 main villains to look out for that you're not really going to know anything about if you're coming to this game as a super fan, but you can at least identify that they're villains because they've been arrested and Spider-Man's name is underneath them. I feel like this Kingpin situation is sort of like doing that, but through gameplay, where you might not really understand who this character is, and you might not need to understand who this character is, but the action of playing the game and getting to know the mechanics and then eventually taking down this character teach you who this character is. And I think that this game, like, in that way, starts off really strong.
Yeah, I'm just glad we didn't have to start over with Uncle Ben dying. That as a tired trope. I'm sick of every Spider-Man story starting with that. And I'm glad they didn't start with that, and we started in an action-packed opening going against the Kingpin. Actually, when I started, I was like, okay, yeah, we're going to have to go through that again. Because I went into this game completely blind. So I knew nothing about it. Nothing about the opening, who we were fighting, or anything. So to just jump right into the action, we're going after the Kingpin. There's already this established, like, lore between himself and Yuri, the police officer, and the cops already know him, and I was like, okay, this is actually different. This is refreshing.
You start the game and Peter Parker loves cops.
Ugh.
That's one of the, honestly, I don't want to get into that super hardcore, but
Flora,
like,
I said it for you.
I know,
literally for this reason.
I can feel that you said that for me.
Yeah.
That's the one thing about this game that like aged so horribly.
Mm-hmm.
This game came out in 2018. And then, like, if you followed American current events from 2018 on, I mean, like, honestly, way before, but, like, let's look at where the media's focus was over that timeline.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
I don't think you can really go back to this game.
Yeah.
And even Miles Morales, I hate to say, and not have a little bit of a wince at the way in which this game is so deferential to the police, just across the board. Do you want to say anything about that, Ella?
Yeah, it was really cringe. I I guess we'll get into it later, but there were some parts of the game where I was just like, huh, yeah, you can definitely tell this game was made before anything else happened in this country. Because the cops, he's so friendly to the cops. And I was just like, there were some times in the game where I simply was like, this is awkward. I don't like this. But
I think awkward does capture that feeling.
Yes. And then his relationship with the main, isn't she a detective or a captain? I forgot already. With Yuri.
Yeah, Yuri?
Yes.
She's a high rank.
She's a high ranked. And the fact that she's like, yeah, just go above the law. Don't tell me about it, but you can do it. And we'll fix it later. I'm just like, okay, yeah, this is a period piece, basically. Mm-hmm. This is a period piece before 2020.
But I mean, isn't that like the Commissioner Gordon problem too in the Batman series of like Commissioner Gordon essentially uses and leverages his relationship with Batman and the work that Batman does to continue to get promotions. Like he usually starts as a lieutenant and then becomes a commissioner only because like he's got Batman in his back pocket who's like solving the crime problem. I'm using like quotation marks, but this is exactly what like Yuri Watanabe is as well. Is like, oh yes, I've got Spider-Man on my side. If you want to go above the law, wink, you can, but don't pull me into it because I'm a clean cop.
Yeah, and then sometimes she just completely acts like, oh, I don't want you to do this, but I do want you to do this, but I don't want you to do this. I'm just like, if you're going to be on his side, just do it fully. Don't pussyfoot around.
I do like the relationship strictly from like the voice acting perspective. I think that Yuri's voice actor and like Yuri Lowenthal like had really good chemistry between them, even though we've said all the things about it. Flora, disagree?
No, not to disagree. We just have to acknowledge how strange it is that Yuri Lowenthal is interacting with the character named Yuri in this scene. Like I
Yes.
When I went back over that scene again earlier, I was just once again baffled. Like how. I can't imagine what that must have been like, assuming they recorded in the same room, proximity-wise. I think to address the Commissioner Gordon point, I think this game like sort of buffers itself from that critique preemptively a little bit with the fact that the characters who are representing law enforcement, or at least like the structural power of law enforcement, happen to be people of color. And so like Yuri's character, or even Miles's father later in the story, like we were talking about the absence of an Uncle Ben story, Miles's character sort of gets one in this game later, and I don't want to spoil it directly, but that's another moment of like Spider-Man teams up with this cop, this leader cop even, and then at the end of the story, like we were made sympathetic with this guy because of what happens to him. And so I think that the game, despite it, I agree, feeling like a period piece in that manner, sort of gets away with the thing that, like, the Commissioner Gordon example, like, won't really fall into the scrutiny about, because, number one, Commissioner Gordon is traditionally, like, portrayed as a white guy, but also, like, a lot of the Batman games, to which this game takes a lot of inspiration, like the Arkham games specifically, came out with enough of a buffer between those current events that we're all sort of alluding to and dancing around. And therefore, I think that they are able to escape that critique and that comparison in a way that this game kind of can't, because of like how directly tied both Batman and Spider-Man are to enforcing the law, like through a vigilante style approach. So I think that if there was that next Rocksteady game that came out in 2020 or something, we probably would have a similar conversation. It's just kind of a roll of the dice that we didn't.
What I love about this game beyond like playing it is, I think, and this applies to Miles Morales and maybe to a lesser extent, but like Miles Morales, is that not only does this game feel really big at some moments, but I think it does a really great job at like setting like really small settings as well. So I think of F.E.A.S.T a lot as being like the shelter that both Aunt May and Peter and Martin Lee, who then, you know, we're going to do light spoilers now and then full spoilers in a little bit, but who ends up becoming one of the main antagonists in the game. It just really, like, time and place and setting, they do really well here on a smaller scale. And then the relationship between Martin Lee and Peter Parker, almost Martin as a fatherly figure, is is really well done. I don't know if you guys loved the feast stuff as much as I did, or if you felt there were other settings that just felt really small, quaint, and nice.
Yes, I love the smaller settings because the game is so open world. Being able to go into Feast, I talked to everyone there. I spoke to everyone I could there, from the homeless who were working there over there to some of the other workers, and they actually felt like real people. Like, I think there was also a point in the second Spider-Man game where there are conversations that are going on, even when even though Peter is not interacting with them, and it made the whole situation, like, it made Feast feel like I'm actually in this homeless shelter helping people, listening to their problems, and it felt genuine. Like, because you can definitely tell Peter cares about it. So does Aunt May and Martin Lee, even though he does become an antagonist later on. That this was a safe place, and there's a crime mission you can do, like at the very beginning of the game, where you help someone and they're like, well, I have nowhere to go. And like, oh, here's Feast. And I think you can actually see that character model in Feast later on. So that was a good, like, little Easter egg. There's also other side missions that are connected with that. And I was like, the side missions in, like, places like Feast or the college, or even with Dr. Octavius, those cutscenes and little locations, I guess after being in such an open world, they felt less claustrophobic. You're focused. So
Right. That's sort of my main feeling about the character writing and the interactions throughout not only Feast but the rest of the game, is that they offer us a sort of contrast and a respite from the grandiosity of the city. So, like, the intimacy of those scenes really affords us that emotional connection that I personally wasn't expecting, which is, like, hence the whole why I red boxed this game thing. I thought this would be a one and done game for me. I did not expect it to be as emotionally impactful and as mechanically fun as I ended up finding it. But as you were speaking, Ella, it also made me think that, like, some of the strengths in the writing of the characters, I think, happen in one-on-one scenes more than they do anything else, because there are a few scenes that have more characters than that. Let's say 3 to 5. But there's seldom more than that amount of characters on screen interacting in any given cutscene, any given time throughout the story. And as you mentioned, like, you walk around and can, like, pick up dialogue as well. But the one-on-ones between Peter and Aunt May in Feast, or Peter and Martin Lee in Feast, or even Aunt May and Martin Lee together, like, one-on-one there, are all distinct in a way that I remember. Like, I remember Peter interacting with Miles later in the game. I remember all of those one-on-ones so much more clearly than I do anything else, like the Otto and Peter relationship.
Yeah.
So I think that if Insomniac is nailing any part of the writing, I think it's those one-on-one emotional exchanges. That's not a critique against their larger scale scenes, but when something, let's say, like, this game presents you with multiple villains in one fight, and there's dialogue happening in this fight, and there's, let's say, 4 characters interacting in this exchange, I couldn't tell you anything that happens there other than just it was a cool set piece. Yeah. So anyway, the Feast thing, I think, really gives us a great springboard for great interactions in that intimate way.
I'm just going to disagree with you just a skosh. Only when you talked about Octavius and Peter. I remember that, and I think it's really like any of the fatherly exchanges, because Peter doesn't have a father, doesn't have an uncle, doesn't have a male model in his life. So he's got Martin Lee, who he sort of looks up to as a philanthropist in the city. And then he's got Octavius, who sort of is his, like, subject matter, like, domain expert, and is sort of like almost treating him like a son there too. So it's, again, we're not going to spoil things fully yet, but, like, just sort of made me really sad to see what happened with both of those characters as we went. Even though I know the lore and I know what's going to happen, it still made me sad to kind of see that happen to Peter over time.
Ooh, I don't know where we disagree about that, because I feel like I agree with every word that just came out of your mouth.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you had said something about Peter and Octavius.
Oh, like, no, it might have sounded like a contrast. I think that's another good example of writing is the Octavius and Peter relationship. to be clear. I like that you just pointed out that there's like a bifurcation in his father figures, because I hadn't thought of it that way. That's exactly what the game is doing.
Yeah, because I do see the father figure angle, because like I said, Peter has no male role model in his life anymore. Uncle Ben passed away, died. His grave said 2010, so he would have been like 16. And then so you have Martin Lee, who's this philanthropist. His aunt works with him, and he's like, he's basically going, this is the kind of person I'm doing this for. Like, I'm fighting villains in the city for these people to actually be the real heroes. And then with Dr. Octavius, if you do all of the backpack missions and pick up the backpacks, you find out he had a offer to work with Norman Osborn, but he went with Dr. Octavius because he was like, I want to help people, because Dr. Octavius helps people. He's trying to help people. And it's more of like saying that these folks were the real heroes. I'm just a person in costume, but these people like Martin and Octavius, Otto, are actually helping physical people.
How did y'all feel about Norman Osborn in this one? Because I think that he's sort of the perfect foil as like billionaire / mayor of the city. It's cliche, but I think it super works.
I think cliche is about how I was going to respond. I feel like I'm so attached to the Willem Dafoe portrayal from the Sam Raimi trilogy that it's impossible for me to pry that image in my head out and allow this one in. And I'm constantly, therefore, comparing the video game version of Norman Osborn. I think that in the beginning, this character is very... I don't trust him because I know who he is and I know where his character is likely to devolve. But he's very, like, amiable in the beginning and very supportive, and he compliments Otto a lot. And I'm not sure if this version of this character is going to descend rapidly, like within this one game, or if this character is, as we know now, over the course of a trilogy, going to have a gradual declension. And so I think that it's successful, the portrayal of this character, insofar that by the end of this game, like when Otto is going super aggressive, he's willing to drop Norman. Like, Norman, like, insults him directly and insults his intelligence and says, you're a failure, Otto. And at that point, like, we have seen at least a jump in character development in terms of what he's willing to express in front of the camera for us.
When I started the game and it said that he was mayor, I was just like, red flags, like, sirens went off in my head, because I went into this game blind. I didn't know who the villains were going to be or anything. So I was like, okay, we have Norman Osborn. I remember the Willem Dafoe portrayal of him. I was fully expecting that when I saw him. And when he shows up in the lab, meeting Otto, I was just like waiting for the pin to drop. But no, he was still sleazy. And he was still, but then he immediately complimented Peter, saying, "Oh, Peter, hi, how are you doing?" All the while he is ruining Otto's life. And there was like this contrast between, you have Norman, who is the mayor. He is basically a horrible person. I'm going to say it. He is a horrible person. He is a straight up horrible person. And he's opportunistic too, because he uses what's happening into the game to advance his own self. His own, like, he's trying to win. He's going through a re-election. He's trying to win that re-election, and he's using everything possible, like Miles' dad, Spider-Man, even though he says, I don't like Spider-Man. He's using what Peter's compliments are, until it blows up into his face. And of course, we're going to talk about how that blows up into his face later. And even with what happens at the end of the game, and not when Otto confronts him, but later, I guess it was trying to wring sympathy out of me. I couldn't be sympathetic. I was sympathetic to the other person, but not him. And I don't know if they will go that Green Goblin route with Norman Osborn, but like, I was expecting him to show up in this game. But we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, I mean, Green Goblin is an iconic villain.
Yes,
so
I was
sort of expecting it too. I somehow dodged all spoilers about Spider-Man 2018, so there was a couple pleasant surprises.
same.
Flora, do you have any? I want to talk about one other set of characters, but Flora, did you have something first?
No, I was sitting here visibly zipping my lips, having finished Spider-Man 2. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh no.
I finished Spider-Man 2 last night, so like I think we're both keeping our lips zipped on this one.
Oh, I can't wait to play it then.
Also very good. Before we talk about the actual gameplay mechanics, I was shocked in this game, having had no exposure to what was in this specific one. Obviously, I know Miles Morales is a character that will be in the pseudo-sequel and then the second game, but I was actually very surprised that he was playable, at least as a human in this game, and that they set up, Rio Morales, they set up Jefferson Davis, his father, the police officer, and Miles. Can I just say, I love Miles Morales as a character. I think Miles is so much more compelling as a Spider-Man than Peter Parker. Peter Parker is a vessel for whatever the actual artist wants to do. Where I think Miles has like time, place, setting, personality, and I love Miles Morales.
Yeah.
Here. I think it's so fun that this and Spider-Verse came out at the same time, like I think the same calendar year. That's the first time I went to the cinema in like 5 years, was to see Spider-Verse. And I'm completely obsessed now. Like and Miles has like way better suits than Peter. No offense, Peter.
Yes.
Yeah, he totally has way better suits and way better powers too. I'm biased. I love his powers more than Peter's. But yes, I was not expecting to play as Miles at all in this game. I just thought he was going to be a background secondary character, and of course, I knew he was going to get his powers because of technically second game, the Miles Morales game, but I did not expect him to be here. That's actually to play him. He actually has a mechanic in this game, which I was actually honestly expecting Peter to use later, but we'll talk about that later too. But yeah, I was not we actually got to connect with him, and and actually learn his character. And he, like I said, it wasn't just like, oh, this is just Peter interacting with Miles. Here he is. This is Miles Morales. You're going to see him later. He's going to be the second Spider-Man. This is Miles Morales before he becomes Spider-Man, and this is what leads up to him being the new Spider-Man. Yes, Laura.
It really makes you think, is MJ the third Spider-Man?
Right?
I mean, gender bending aside, we do play as her.
Oh, the MJ sections. I have words about that.
We can get there too. Just catharsis time?
Let's just catharsis time. The worst part of this video game, right?
Oh my god.
Here. Yes.
Oh my god.
There's stealth sections where you go in and you have to just sneak through and do some objective. And not only do I think they're boring and they are like you get detected way too easily, but it's not fun. It is easily like the next least fun thing is fun. This is the only unfun thing in this video game.
Yeah. I didn't like a single one of her sections at all. Like, the first one that popped up, I was just like, okay, I know where I need to go. Just let me go there. Why do I have to sneak around to get... And then it was... If these sections weren't in the game and just a cutscene, like an entire cutscene, I would have been fine with that. Not...
Same.
Yeah.
Well, like, I only bring this up because Miles has segments that are just like this.
Yes, he
and
does.
I hate all of the stealth segments in this game.
Yes.
There's like two things I actually think are not fun, Jacob. In addition to the one that we've just identified, there's these like science puzzles that you pick up in the game, like where you fly to a rooftop and then all of a sudden you're like moving pipes around and connecting them to enable water to flow through them in a time limit. Like, I think that's really dull. For the game that this is presenting, and I believe there's an accessibility way out of those puzzles.
There is.
If I'm not mistaken.
I think you can skip
Yeah, you can
them.
skip all the puzzles.
There is some way to skip them, or you can just choose not to go to them. But for spider tokens or whatever, I was doing them. But the stealth sections are just unforgivable because they're insta-fail.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not just that they're boring. It's not just that you get detected too easily. It's not just that you can see where you're going and you get frustrated about that. It's that as soon as you make the smallest mistake, parentheses mistake, question mark, you get reset. And I like, that's so, like, there's no progress within these stealth missions. And I find that, like, for such a well-designed game to have something like this is really confusing, because it doesn't have one of those otherwise irritating features where it says, like, you know when you die in an RPG like 8 times in a row and it says, like, would you like to reduce the difficulty to be able to move on? And then, like, you swallow your ego and say, no, of course not. Yes, I would like to move on. Like, I would love that for the stealth puzzle. Just skip me ahead. Just show me the cutscene. Just let's go.
Yeah.
The fact that it isn't, I find to be very frustrating and really confusing, given how successful I think everything else in this game is.
Yeah. And another issue I had with the stealth sections is that they bugged out on me. One of Miles. Yeah. One of Miles' last stealth sections, the one in the 3rd act. Yeah, the person who's chasing him bugs out, so he's just in the way and you can't move, so you have to fail it. So I failed it, and it was still bugged. I ended up having to close the game and reload the save and had to do that entire section over again, and finally he was unbugged, and I was just like, and it wasn't just his, MJ's bugged out like that as well, where you activated one of the distraction devices and one of the bikers moved and then got stuck in the way, so you could not go around him, and it was endlessly frustrating. Why were they in the game?
What was good though is basically everything else.
Yeah.
The combat, particularly, like, we'll talk about movement and combat. I think combat gets really close to what you would get in an Arkham game, although it's more, in my opinion, acrobatic. If Batman is like more, I'm just gonna break your face with my fist, Spider-Man is like the acrobatic version of that.
Yeah.
As far as the combat being compared to Arkham goes, I think that's obviously the most dead-on comparison, 1-to-1. But I think Arkham is actually more successful at the end of the day than this game is, even though I kind of like this game more because just the Spider-Man affinity. The thing that I think Arkham does better is that the gadgets that you get for this character are so much more crucial in an Arkham game. Like let's say the batarang that you like move with remote control, or like the grapple thing that you send off across to be able to stealth kill enemies. You do eventually get that in the Spider-Man game, but when I was playing this, I don't know about any of you all, you have such an expansive toolkit of what you can do as Spider-Man, whether that's literally using spider gadgets or just like meleeing or using like the focus abilities or any of these other things. I forgot I had spider gadgets and just never used them the entire game. And like by the end, when I was starting to look at trophy cleanup, that's when I remembered I had them. Whereas with like Arkham's combat, they were integrated into how you progress the game. And I think that that's another strange thing to overlook, because this game is so combat heavy. And I think that when it's there, that's one of my favorite things to do in this game is combat. I just think that that's a weird thing that most games don't present me with, where I forget about a because it doesn't make it integral for me to use. Did we feel that way as well, or is that just me?
I was the complete opposite of that. I used all the gadgets, well, not all of them, and I'll explain why I didn't use all of them. The gadgets were integral for me when I went to the different bases, because there can be like, you can get, especially near the 3rd act, you can get swarmed, and all of your other abilities can be cooldown, but like the spider drone, it was completely helpful against the flying enemies, and it would actually get them off my back while I fought the weaker enemies, or the ones I need to finish off, or if I need to get a combo because the bases had different achievements for what you need to do there to get the tokens, and the tokens were another frustration. But I used all of the gadgets except 2 of them, because 2 of them required challenge tokens, and I decided to use my challenge tokens for something else. And I'll just get to those when I do the DLC. But I use all the abilities, especially when I unlocked all the suits. I guess it all depended on what situation I was in. If I was surrounded by enemies, I'm going to use the gadgets. If I am fighting a boss, that is when I used everything I had. If I died, I actually reloaded or changed what my suit did. So I could, especially in one boss fight, which we'll talk about later. I keep saying that when we talk about later.
I mean, we'll come back to it, but I think I'm sort of in the middle where I had my favorites. Like, I obviously experimented with everything, but definitely anything with a web shooter. I was using my web shooters in basically all the games as sort of my primary, where like I'm webbing up dudes whenever I can. And then anything that had webs I was using a lot. So something like a web bomb I'd use. The impact web I thought was really helpful. But anything that went beyond that, like I really leaned on like just being Spidey in combat, and a lot of the same moves, especially later in the game, where like my favorite thing was webbing somebody up and then like taking them and flipping them onto a car or flipping them onto a wall to get them to stick to the wall, so I wouldn't have to like go through and beat everyone up to faint.
I feel like primitive knuckle dragger over here, because my go-to technique in combat was just like jump in the air, swing, and kick somebody off a rooftop. And the way that this game works, because Spider-Man doesn't kill people like Kiryu and Yakuza, is that you get like web attached to a building if you get kicked off. And so the side of the building after every combat encounter was just like peppered with like goons. And so I wouldn't actually engage in combat. I would just kick them off repeatedly, unless I was doing like a street mission where like a carjacking happened or something. And but it's interesting how we all took very different approaches there.
And that was a funny mechanic, because when I was kicking people off the building, I was like, oh no, I killed people. And then you would see them stuck on a building far away, covered in web. And I was like, oh, okay, they're alive.
Have you ever been reading through a stack of comics and thought, maybe I should see what that Arkham Asylum game is all about? Or been playing Marvel vs. Capcom and felt like you were at a real disadvantage since you didn't know who half the characters were? Well, Play Comics is the show for you. I'm Chris, and each episode we take a look at video games based on comic properties and how well they stick to that source material. So whether you know the comics and want to know how all those games work, or you know the games and want to find out where all this craziness came from, go check out Play Comics at playcomics.com or wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
Do you feel like you're the only person in your circle who wants to go deep about video games regularly?
We were like that too, until now.
Welcome to Crossplay Conversations, the brand new bi-weekly topical video game podcast from Luke Lewis,
Joseph Hooper,
and Jacob McCoy.
With many years of breaking it down separately on shows like the Left Behind Game Club, Player Podcast, and Lukewarm Games, the gang is finally coming together to publish their gaming group chat in audio form every other week.
Expect roundtable reviews of the latest games, profiles of upcoming indies, and insightful conversations about essential topics in the video game industry. All with a mostly positive, insightful, and fun style.
Help us out by subscribing on your podcast platform of choice to get the first episodes delivered straight to your feed.
And follow us on Twitter at Crossplay Convos for updates about the show.
Cheers and happy gaming.
So we talked about the combat, the gadgets. Spidey is not good on the ground. He no run good, but I think as soon as you get into the air, there's almost nothing better than the actual swinging mechanics in this game. I know we've talked about some of the other Spider-Man games, but I just thought the locomotion and the sense of, once you start to be able to like thwip around corners and, start to do, and correct me because I've played all 3 Spider-Man games in a row. But can you do air tricks in this one?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah. Even doing air tricks is fun. Like, harkens way back to like when Neversoft was putting Spider-Man in Tony Hawk games,
Yeah.
I definitely think the web slinging was one of my favorite parts of this game, and I think a component of that is just the fluidity of the animations, but also there are different types of traversal you can do. Like, you can choose to be like accelerated in speed or height, and those are sort of mutual exclusives, like per the physics system, where if you really want to like, let's say, dive into a low swing that then you let go of really early on and the arc back up, you will then shoot forward really quickly. You will not get a lot of height. But if you want to like hold on to that swing a little longer, you'll shoot above the next skyscraper. And like that sort of stuff, the experimenting with the physics system is what kept me just running around, because it took me a surprisingly long time to realize there was a fast travel system in this game. I think it tells you that there is, but like I didn't care to use it. I think I used it like twice just to see, because I saw something on Twitter that was like, oh, haha, it's just like real life New York where there's like Spider-Man just chilling on the subway and the New Yorkers just don't care. They're just chilling on their phones. Like I was like, I want to see what that animation looks like. But that was the only time I used fast travel. I did want to go manually across the city every single time because of just the way the mechanics felt.
I feel bad now because I used to fast travel a lot, especially when I was trying to avoid story missions. Because if I had to go somewhere, if I wanted to do a side mission and there was a story mission right the way, if you guys noticed, if you got too close, you automatically started the story mission. And so I was like, well, I, since I am a completionist, I did all of the, I activated everything and I did all of the science missions. I had different fast travel locations. So I was like, well, here's the closest one to where I need to go. So I'll just fast travel here. And, so I cycled through a lot of the different, the subway scenes, because they actually do change as the story progresses. There is one where after you have a side mission where there's a fake Spider-Man, you see him on the subway. Or in the third act, there's on the fast travel is Spider-Man's taking the subway, but he's taking it a different way. Which, because I can't talk about the third act just yet, what happens there, but I always utilize the fast travel mechanic, but the mechanics in the game of being able to swing around, it felt exhilarating, especially when I finally learned how you can actually speed up when you're in the air. Because on the PS4, it is L3, you have to press down on it, and I was like, I need to catch this car. How could I catch it? And I had to check I was like, oh, I just have to press L3. And
wouldn't it be nice if we still had instruction manuals and you could just look at it and say like, oh yes, L3.
That's why I like the Mass Effect physical, because it has the instructions on how on the controller instructions. But yeah, I parkoured across the buildings. There was one mission where, like I said, it's in the third act, where I have to get to a certain building really fast. I parkoured on the buildings because going on the ground, Spider-Man just runs. He doesn't even, it's not even a run, it's a light jog. The only good thing about being on the ground is you can high-five people, and they actually tell you where some of your collectibles are, or some other mission is. They're like, hey, Spider-Man, there's some kids like throwing rocks at a backpack covered in web. Is that one of yours? Or, hey, there's a bunch of people on a roof. I don't know what they're doing there. And they'll actually point it out, and it shows up on your main map if you haven't gotten to it yet. And I thought that was a cool mechanic. But that was really the only times I was on the ground.
Flora, you were making gestures about like high-fiving. How many times did y'all, as Spider-Man, high-five somebody or give somebody a finger gun?
Countless times.
I think just enough. Isn't there an achievement for this?
Yes.
There is.
Yeah.
There is.
I did it that many times.
5 times. Great. Excellent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ella, you've said it many times that you've been teasing, talking about story bits. I think this is probably the time where we throw up the full spoiler wall and say, if you have any interest in the story of Spider-Man 2, you may want to stop this now, because we are going to fully spoil the rest of the game, because I think there's some fun story bits. So that's your warning. Here we go. I will start by saying that I, at the start, was like, man, there just aren't a lot of villains in this game, because really, like, you get Kingpin, you get Martin Lee, and those are sort of the villains in the first, like, half of the game that you're really taking on.
Shocker.
And then there's the one you take down in a bank.
Yes.
Is it Shocker that you sort of take down as well? And I was like, where are the rest of the villains? And then holy villains in the last 25% in the third part of the game. Very pleasantly surprised. Love that part. what were maybe some of your favorite moments if you had to pick some?
Okay. I'll go first. So we've been hinting around Dr. Octavius. We already know that he becomes Doc Ock. In the second mission of the game, you actually go to your real job and you see him working on what already looks like his tentacle arms, and they are malfunctioning, and it's more like a dramatic irony to us because we already know who he's going to be. But it was, is he going to be this in this game, or is it going to be a later game? And as the story progresses, every time I went back to the lab every time. And if you guys did not notice, he had the raft on a whiteboard. And he already had stuff circled. And when you asked about it, he was like, oh, I'm doing security. Peter was like, okay, that's cool. That sounds nice. You find his suit, and he goes, and Peter like, oh, I guess the doc needed an electro suit or something. And then you see him working on an arm. There's another whiteboard. And Peter goes, oh, that's weird. Why is he doing it that way? And it's like Peter's refusing, either he's refusing to see what is happening. Or not that he's refusing. It's just that it's like Dr. Octavius would never do anything like this. Also, he had the picture of the Spider-Man, the Sinister Six, on a pinboard in his office. And when Peter asked him about it, Peter was like, I asked Doc about it, and he just said that he liked the news articles. And I really went, really? Why would he have all of your villains who are all on the raft, and he circled each of their cells, and he's saying he's doing security for them, and it's not clicking. It's clicking for us. The person who's playing the game is clicking for us what Dr. Octavius is planning on doing. But it's still a shock. It's still a shock to see him there at the raft in the end of the second act, where it's a major betrayal. Because for Peter, he's like, because Dr. Octavius knows that Peter has been helping Spider-Man, but he doesn't know Peter is Spider-Man. And he's like, Dr. Octavius broke all these people out. Why is he doing this? Why did he spread the dragon's breath to kill a bunch of people? And it's how can I put into words? It is a shocking scene, because up until that point, like Jacob said, Dr. Octavius has been a father figure. He is the person who gave Peter a chance after he left college. They were helping people. And when Norman came in and shut his business down, his lab down, basically for no reason other than to be petty, it was, I'm like, at first I was like, okay, that's the trigger that made him want to do this. But then we find out that Otto has been planning this for years. And I saw you raise your hand. Or do you? But it's...
I think for me, like, I didn't notice, probably because I'm dumb. But like, the thing that I noticed about Octavius was like, because he had a special like lair where he kept all of these, essentially because he like heals or upgrades every single member of the Sinister Six, which I thought was actually quite cool. And like, they put it in your face in, I think, the third act, where they're like, he's a bad man and here's exactly what he's done. But I didn't really notice the things that he was doing around the lab. The thing that I noticed with Octavius was like, he very quickly declines in his like mental stability from the point where he like starts to use the suit when when his funding is about to run out, and when he like essentially has to like really get this to work. He like hooks himself up to these arms, which there's no like blocker between the arms and his brain or something, and so his behavior starts to change really rapidly. I think in that second act, when his behavior starts to get really erratic, that's when I just went in and I went, oh no, but my fake dad is getting bad. This is not good.
No, he was bad the entire time because...
Oh,
yeah, because when you go to that secret lair, apparently he had been helping other villains for months. Like, I actually wrote in my notes of... Otto had money to do all of this and buy buy medicine for Vulture, but not pay Peter.
Oh my god, yeah. There's that whole scene where like Peter's like, "Don't worry, Doc. I'll do this all for free. Like it's worth it for the greater good." Meanwhile,
at the same time,
right?
And like, because Peter is basically living out of the lab. And it hit me that Peter was actually helping him build this suit this entire time. Like, all of the little extra stuff where you're doing the different chemical and electric stuff, that's for the Doc Ock suit. And it's, I was just like, wow, Peter, you actually helped build this villain's entire outfit. And he did it right in front of your face. And you didn't see it. And it's almost like with Martin Lee, but Martin Lee hit it better.
Yeah.
Because, at least with Martin Lee, he had a bit of a remorse to what he was doing. Well, not what he was doing, but how it would affect the people he knew. Because in the comics, Mr. Negative is actually a split personality. And JJ mentions that in one of his podcasts, is he a Mr. Negative? Is it a split personality? How is this philanthropist actually this evil person? In comics, it's like that. But here it is that his anger at Norman Osborn is so great that he's like, I don't want the people at F.E.A.S.T to be affected, but I'm going to go after this man for what he did to me. And he had every right to be angry at Norman, but not angry enough to drag other people into it. I also read the Spider-Man has a Twitter feed in the if you pause, well, not the pause section, but where you do your suit. Spider-Man has a Twitter feed which actually updates with what happens in the game, and some of the posts were of people who were sympathetic to Martin Lee too, saying one person said that Martin Lee helped the mentally ill, but no one helped him with his problems. And I was like, Martin is not mentally ill. He was more filled with revenge, more than this is something that a mental illness caused. And I think someone actually replied to that post and was like, no, he's just evil. And I don't think it's that either. It was just that he was so blinded with his revenge that he did not care what happened to anyone else except what happened to the people. Well, he cared about May and F.E.A.S.T. And that's it. That's where the line stopped.
I would call him cruel. I think the best villains are always the ones that can like really get you to sympathize and almost get them on your side or get you on their side. Or like you alluded to, like Martin Lee essentially was these powers were like foisted on him and he killed his parents because of these powers. And then even if you think of Otto was a partner of Norman Osborn. Norman basically like threw him to the curb, and now he's a scientist that has not been able to get funding and is not rich and is not the mayor of the city. So really like using Norman Osborn as sort of the person that's caused angst with both of these characters I really love. And I wouldn't say I really sympathize with with Martin Lee, with Mr. Negative. I just think his means are very cruel. Like, to essentially, and weird timing in 2018, we're gonna put a whole pandemic in the city of New York is weird given what happened right afterwards. But having Devil's Breath, like putting that on the whole city and just like not caring about the health of others was sort of cruel. I know it wasn't him, exclusively, but like Otto and Martin and those folks just saying like Devil's Breath, go, is sort of wild.
Especially when there was no cure. Well, no cure that they knew of, and then they were actually trying to stop a cure from being made. And that's when it went from, okay, this is revenge against Norman, because if they released the Devil's Breath just to Norman Osborn, I'm like, okay, yeah, your revenge is done. You guys got it done.
Yep.
But the fact that Otto released it at a rally for Norman in Times Square, full of innocent people who had nothing to do with their issue or problem at all, and he got those people killed and thousands of people sick, and it was like your quest for revenge has turned into basically a mass murder. Like, you have lost the plot, basically, like, because Norman Osborn is your target. You're like, oh, we're going to destroy everything that Norman likes. I was like, then go after his business. Like, well, they did go after his businesses.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, just go after his businesses. Don't go after the innocent people who have nothing to do with this. And
yeah, kill the man, kill his son, kill his businesses, but like, just because he's the mayor of a city, there's more to it. But like take after or go after the city that he governs, like. That's where it then becomes like exceedingly cruel.
Martin's boss fight, Martin Lee's Mr. Negative's boss fight, when you have you're fighting him and you're fighting a bunch of other shadow people, Martin basically tells you why he's doing this, and Peter says what I said, was like, you can't drag other people into this, and that is where you cross the line. You can even read it in his, like, he has a letter in his office where he says, the Kingpin is down. I never thought this day would come. I can now go after Norman Osborn. And he's like, I don't want anything to happen to F.E.A.S.T or May or be a part of this. And I'm sorry if you read this. I'm very sorry what you see about me. But it was like, yeah, like I said, if you just stuck it to just robbing Kingpin of his money and his guns and going after Norman, for what he did to you, Peter still would have tried to stop you, but it wouldn't have been, oh, all these people are dead because of you. And especially the bombing of the speech of what happened with Miles' dad. I know we've also been avoiding talking about that too. The canon event.
Yeah, and for those who may not have played the game and are still listening, essentially what happens is because of Martin Lee, Jefferson Davis, Miles Morales' father, is killed in an act of heroism. He tries to save folks around him from being exposed. It was a bomb, right?
It was all of the people he infected with his negativity. They all exploded, and it was basically setting off a huge bomb because of all his powers.
Yeah. A negative bomb, and that's when like he passes, and it's sort of a thing for Miles that continues into the next games that I think we won't like fully get into here, because it then goes into Miles Morales and then into Spider-Man 2. But yeah, I want to pull in a question here from Adam Gumbert from the Discord. Adam asks, how do you feel about the way the game handles the villain storylines? We've talked ad nauseum about Martin Lee, about Otto Octavius, but we haven't really talked about the minor villains, so I'd love to know if there are any minor villains that like y'all loved as a part of the Sinister Six, and maybe talk about the Sinister Six like just as villains to defeat.
I don't really think that Sinister Six can be classified as minor villains, but like they do sort of function that way in this game. I actually personally I find that to be the highlights of Spider-Man 2018. The little combination fights, whether that is like the stealth sequence even with Miles with the Rhino and Scorpion segments with like the container area, like hearing the villains banter to each other, and these villains that I know really well, having like grown up with these characters. I thought that was really great. And then I think it's Electro and Vulture who you then fight later in the game together.
Yeah.
You fight them in the air together, like over some like shipyard area. That's like so burned into my brain. Like there are so many distinct little visuals and like flickers of cutscenes from that segment. I found those to be like the most like, oh my god, I'm yelling at my television while I'm playing this game moments, leading up to the Doc Ock fight at the end. But I'm okay with not really getting a lot in terms of story from these characters, because we kind of don't, which is why I think you were willing to say minor. There's not really a ton of like cutscene time dedicated to who these characters are or like why they're here in the story, other than like sort of the stuff that Ella was alluding to with like the Doc Ock backstory build up. That being said, I would maybe like to see, instead of what we got with this game's DLC, which was like Silver Sable stuff, I think I maybe would have wanted a little more of the Sinister Six stuff, especially because like Spider-Man 2, again, not to talk about it much, brings in like Mysterio and like there's like some other Sinister Six elements that like I think if you threaded those a little more carefully could make these two games feel a little more linked than the DLC ultimately does. And I only really think that's a critique because of the DLC we got, rather than when I played this game on its own. Like when I played it on its own, I thought those fights were fantastic. Still do.
Yeah, the Vulture and Electro fight, that was actually the hardest boss fight for me in the game. Mostly because...
Was that the suit one?
No, that's the one where they're in the shipyard. Not shipyard, the electric plant with the smokestacks. And...
Sorry, did you have to change your suit for that one? You had mentioned that
that's
earlier.
not the one I had to change my suit for. I had to change my suit for the Rhino fight.
Oh, okay.
This one I didn't change my suit for, and I was Fantastic Bagman the entire time for that one. But that one had to be the hardest boss fight for me in the game. And I can see why, also, like, I can agree with Flora on how you can see them as minor characters, because you actually don't learn about them a lot unless you do the backpack missions and pick up all 50 backpacks, because Peter talks about the first time he fought Electro. He's like, oh, I got these gloves for the first time I fought Electro. They didn't work. You have the Rhino horn. He was like, oh, this is from the first time I fought Rhino and I broke off his horn and he still didn't stop running at me. Or like all of his, or mentioning Vulture, JJ actually talks about Vulture a lot in his podcast, about how Vulture blames JJ for his... No, it's Scorpion who blames Jordan. He also brings up Vulture, saying Vulture wants his treatment for his cancer in prison, and JJ is like, we shouldn't be paying for that. He's there for a punishment. But those are the only times you actually hear their names, or actually, like, that's the only lead up you have to them, is the collectibles, the optional collectibles, unless you're getting the trophy, and getting some tokens to level up your suit or your gadgets. If you take the time to stop and listen to JJ talk about them, and then the newspaper clippings on Dr. Octavius's wall. And once I got to the second act, before the end of that act, I kind of felt like, okay, you guys keep talking about these five, well, the four at that time. They're going to show back up. They're going to break out of prison somehow. But I didn't know how they were going to break out of prison. But up until that point, like, the major villains were Mr. Negative and Shocker, who actually was only being an antagonist because of Martin Lee. Martin Lee broke him out of prison, scared him enough that he was willing to do all of these dangerous bank robberies, and risk his life to do all these bank robberies, because whatever Martin threatened him with, or wherever he saw that Martin did, scared him enough to do that. And that was really it. We had Fisk, who was out of the picture, and really you only spoke to him again if you did the little bases, and then the one story mission. And that was it. And that was the only time you spoke to Fisk or even saw him past the first mission. So I can see why you said the other 4 of the Sinister Six are just minor villains, because we don't really learn much about them. You especially don't learn about them if you're just going straight through the game without listening to anything, without picking up any newspapers, without picking up any backpacks. And because really the main villain of the game up until the end of the act is Mr. Negative. And you would think that the game is nothing about him until he gets arrested. So, I could say that is a strength of this game, in a way, of that you're at the middle of the game and the main villain is gone. And you're like, but the game is not over yet. So what is going to happen?
I also think that that's like a really interesting thing that I was considering when playing this game for the first time leading into Spider-Man 2, because it was quite obvious by the end of this game, at least by credits / post-credit scene, that there would be a sequel. And so like the back of the mind question, I think for all of us is like, oh my God, they're pulling all the villains out like right now. How are they going to top this? How are they going to build on this? How are they going to follow this up at all? And again, not to be specific whatsoever, but I think that's a success that the second game does build upon. It's not as focused on these characters, but like I would love to see more of those threads pulled, like leading into Spider-Man 3.
I'm going to pull out one more question here from the community, which will sort of, I think, lead to the last section of this podcast here. Cool. Matt at Gay Stormageddon asked, did it make you cry? And I think what Matt is referring to is the thing that happened in the end. So what I'd love to talk through before we, get into the station here is around the actual end of the game, the Doc Ock fight, and then the things that happen after that. I really adored that fight. I thought it was really cinematic on top of the Oscorp building. A wonderful way to end the game. You get a new suit, you fight Doc Ock, and then there's the, not only what happens with May, but also like what happens in the post-credit scene. Did y'all like that final fight? And then did it make you cry?
Ugh.
Flora, do you want to start this time?
Loved the fight. Agreed with the cinematic elements of it, thought it was thematically resonant, and the rooftop nature of it I thought was incredibly fitting. Fighting with your mentor character, I think, is always a really powerful thing for a story like this to aim for, and the way that it delivers on that I thought was incredibly well executed. Did I cry? Yeah. I mean, I cried everything. Like tell
At
another day that ends in
Octavius
Y.
And Peter, or at what happened with May?
Both. Like, I cry at literally everything. The wind blows the wrong way. The sun shines too brightly. Like, tears are coming out. That's one of the things I didn't expect this game to do. So I'll linger on that point for just a second. Like, I rented this game. That's where my expectations were. Mm-hmm. By the end of the game, I'm sitting there in tears holding my controller, and I rewatched the cutscenes for this recording, and when I got to the May scene where Peter breaks down over Aunt May's body, like, he has to make this impossible choice between saving the city and saving the person he cares about most right now, I cried again. Like, it's so good. Like, they nailed the emotional beats of this so effectively, for me at least. If there's one thing I can say about Insomniac's games that I played so far, they know how to orchestrate a cutscene. They know how to pull emotional threads. You would think the thing I would say would be like the web slinging and the combat and the whatever, the seamless loading and all that. But really the thing I loved and remembered and took away from this game was, wow, that's one of my favorite Spider-Man stories ever. Like, it just punched me in the gut and like didn't say sorry, and I respected it for that. Like, good job, whoever wrote this game. Great job. So,
Ella,
yes.
Did it make you cry? And how did you feel about mentor versus mentee?
Oh, I cried. So going into that boss fight, I was not expecting to have to change my suit because, like I mentioned before, I was Fantastic Bagman, and I was like, I am going to end this game as Fantastic Bagman.
Pulls his bag off.
And but the fact that Peter, I realized why I had to wear that suit, because it was the antithesis to the Doc suit. It was to stop Dr. Octavius. And it was the entire fight, it sounded more, how can I say this? I'm not going to say a therapy session. It sounded like an argument between two people who knew each other the most and cared about each other. And Peter, going into that fight, did not know that Dr. Octavius knew that he was Spider-Man. And the fact that Dr. Octavius was trying to literally kill him, and when it came out that he knew, like, oh, Peter, why are you doing this? I'm sick. I'm doing, like, that was another thing. Dr. Octavius is sick. He has a neurological disease that's making him lose control of his arms and basically lock his brain into his head. And that was part of also why he was doing this, which is not a good reason. But that made Peter so angry. And I realized why it made him angry, because at least while Peter was fighting fighting Octavius, was like, okay, he doesn't know I'm Spider-Man, but I'm going to try to still save him. He doesn't know who I am. And if he knew who I was, he'll probably stop. He wouldn't try to kill me or anything. And when Dr. Octavius said his name and tried to plead with them, it hit Peter and was like, the person I looked up to and cared about is trying to kill me. And it was completely different from Martin Lee, because even though they had a close relationship, it wasn't as close as the one with Dr. Octavius. And
yeah,
one sign of that was at the end of Act 2, where Dr. Octavius did, like, tell Spider-Man to stay out of it and dumped him into the bay and basically left him alive. And that was his stay out of this sign. And that was it.
Mm-hmm.
I cried. I was like, I even cried after, like, I cried, it was an emotional scene. I was crying. I was trying to do that final, the final QTs and fight him on the side of the building, because even though I knew Dr. Octavius is sick, I still have to stop him. Because what he's done is wrong. He's tried to kill me. He's killed other people, and it was going to hurt putting away someone that you spent the entire game connecting with. And then with Aunt May, I was hoping for another option. I was like, where's the third option? Where's the third option on how to copy this? Can we make more of it in time? And when it hit me that no, there's no third option. It's May or the rest of the city. And May knew exactly what Peter was going to pick, because she raised Peter. And so Peter decided to be selfless instead of selfish and saved the city and watched his aunt die. And I cried. I put the controller and I cried. It was rough. Because even though I knew Peter was going to do it, and the reveal that May knew Peter was Spider-Man this entire time, thinking back to all the interactions they had during the game, like, okay, that's why she said that. That's why she said, take care of yourself. Yeah. Oh, I know you're busy, but go do this for, like, she knew. And and she was always proud of him. And it hurt.
Mm-hmm. I don't really have an attachment to the Spider-Man cartoons back in the day. So I think the one add that I have to the comments that you made is that Yuri Lowenthal here has become my like quintessential animated Spider-Man. And I think a lot of that is because of the strength in the vocal performance. The amount of times, like, I think Yuri must do anime as well.
He does.
Because there's a lot of, like, anime man, like, yells at the situation because it's so painful when he's in the hospital room and he's, like, clutching onto Aunt May, when he's yelling at Doc Ock, like, on the top of the building about, like, how it doesn't have to be like this, and how, like, he gave everything to Otto and Otto just, like, does this thing. It just, like, to me, this game and then the other two in the series, as Peter becomes more of a mentor to Miles, just cements Yuri as my quintessential animated Spider-Man. Almost like Kevin Conroy, speaking of the, like, the Batman comparison, how, like, Kevin Conroy is Batman to me. Across all mediums, I don't even care, like, compared to Christian Bale in the movies, Kevin's my Batman. I don't know if he's, like, I'd love to know, as a final question, if y'all are, like, Toby fans, or if you're Andrew fans, or if, you know, you're one of them newfangled, like, Spider-Man MCU fans, but Yuri's definitely a quintessential animated Spider-Man for me now. Who's your Spider-Man in the films? I think you said Raimi was your guy, so Flora. Is it Toby?
Oh, it's always got to be Toby. There's no contest. Okay. Like Spider-Man 3 doing the finger guns with the emo bangs, like, ain't no shot. Absolutely.
Yeah, it has to be the Sam Raimi movies. Toby Maguire.
Okay.
I just want to build on the thought of Yuri Lowenthal being an anime actor. Like, I want to hear Spider-Man be like, "Omae mo shindru," like so bad. like that's literally like, I need a cameo. Like, I'll pay you money. Record this for me, sir. You just put the thought in my head, and now I need it.
I wonder if Yuri has a cameo, because that might be worth it.
I know he does them at anime conventions, so if you catch him at one, you can get him to say it.
We'll get him to intro this show.
If only. I mean, he has guested on Matt Storm's podcast, so who knows? But this game then teases the stuff that comes later. Harry Osborn is in a tank. He's not in Europe, which we haven't even talked about. Harry, voiced by Scott Porter in this game, but there is something that resembles a symbiote in the tank with him. And Miles gets bit by a spider sort of in, like, one of the penultimate acts of the game, a radioactive spider, and so he is also getting powers, and both him and Peter, like, he's like, I'm starting to feel things, it's not puberty, but then, like, jumps on the ceiling and sticks to it, and then so does Peter, and so they start their sort of Spider-Manning together.
Yeah, the point with Harry, like I said, I did all of the science missions, and now that I knew that he was in a tank, he actually did sound really, I guess the voice actor really made him sound really tired, and that thinking back to what he told Peter was like, hey, I need you to do this because my mom and we worked on these, or I'm not able to do these things, and now I realize he wanted him to preserve those projects just in case whatever his dad was helping him with made him pass away. And the fact that MJ was in the same room as him and didn't know in her one sneaking mission.
Crazy. Before we close here, I want to talk, like, did we get it right on the reviews front? This game was reviewed at an 88 on OpenCritic. Just a few points that sort of plus up some of the things that we've said about this. GameSpot gave it a 9. Edmund Tran said a spectacular cinematic presentation and sensational core mechanics help Insomniac's take on a Spider-Man game shine in spite of some unimaginative open world activities. Eurogamer said recommend. Christian Donlan said a rare harmony of developer and license makes Insomniac's open worlder a total treat. Giant Bombs Ben Pack gave it a 4 out of 5 and said Spider-Man combines elements from plenty of other games to deliver a game with expansive combat, exciting traversal, and a solid, authentic story. I think we got it right, y'all. Any final comments about Marvel's Spider-Man 2018 before we close? Ella, the floor is yours first.
This game was great. The only downside was that there were too many collectibles. There were too many.
Yep.
And the Taskmaster missions were just annoying. And the same with the villain, who was a streamer whose name I completely forgot already. But yeah, other than that, I'm hoping that the later games lessen on the collectibles. I don't know. I'll find out myself, but This game was amazing. I'm so glad I went into it completely unspoiled, which is actually hard to do since this is a popular game. People love it and talked about it so much. So Insomniac did a great job, and it actually makes me want to go play Miles Morales. I have to get the PS4 version, or wait until I get a PS5, but they did a good job, and I can't wait to see what they do with Wolverine.
Come for the web slinging, stay for the Alex Jones commentary. Like, honestly, like, this game had such a sense of humor to it. One thing we didn't acknowledge that I will say with a bit of seriousness is one of my favorite scenes in the game is a relationship scene, and I ended up writing an article about the Mary Jane and Peter Parker relationship later for the second game, unrelated to this. But in Spider-Man 1, the 2018 game, there's a scene of text messages where, like, Spider-Man and MJ are going back and forth, or I should say Peter and MJ, about the relationship. And, like, Spider-Man's like, "It's over, by the way." "Oh, wait, that's not what I meant. And then, like, I didn't mean the relationship, I meant, like, the fight with this villain. And then she's like, "Oh, okay, good." And then he's like, "Do you want it to be over?" Like, it's just this really, like, I'm sure many of us have been there before in a relationship where we're sitting there communicating in a limited way, and we're feeling the limitations of the way we're talking to the person, and we aren't fully saying what we're thinking and feeling, and yet that's backfiring on us. Like, if we would only just say the full version of what we're thinking, maybe that would make things easier and more clear. Is that just me? Anyway, I loved that scene, and I think that that's one of the more powerful moments of writing, even though it's like a text message sequence. So just wanted to throw that out there. Really, really strong relationship building, I think, across this game overall.
That article, correct me if I'm wrong, is Couples Therapy in Marvel Spider-Man 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We'll include that in the resources, so if you want to have a read and you've played Spider-Man 2, give that a read. It has a lot of spoilers in it, though. So
yeah, tons of spoilers. And just a quick little fun fact about that, I finally have been, like, I've made it to the big leagues of writing about video games. That article finally got published on some, like, college "we will write your essay for you" website where, like, you can now buy you can buy my article for $11 if you want to plagiarize my work.
Congratulations.
So, I finally made it.
Congratulations.
Woohoo. Big time, baby.
It took a while.
There's a reason why I've blown through this entire series over the course of like a 6 to 8 week period. They're popcorn, they're fun, but they have like a surprising amount of nuance to them. I will say that like Spider-Man Miles Morales has like a fun sense of like place that's even better than the first game, and then like Spider-Man 2 is like popcorn. So, and it's really good. So if you're looking for something to play and you've somehow made it this far and you're still curious, play Spider-Man Miles Morales, play Spider-Man 2, and even if you do all three, you might not burn out on them. That is our show. So Ella, thank you so much for being on the show today. If folks want to find you, if you could just repeat where folks could find you, that would be great.
Thank you guys for inviting me. You can find me on TikTok at Setobox, which another with an X in the end, another X, 2 X's. On Twitter at Seto Sweet Home. I'm on Twitch. I stream nearly every day or every other day. Come and drop by at Setobox there as well. I play Overwatch, and I play it badly. It's fun. But yes, thank you guys so much for inviting me. It has been fun talking about Spider-Man. Like I said, I did not expect to have this much fun with this game, and I hope I can be back.
I mean, I didn't expect us to like talk about Spider-Man as long as we did either, because I was like, there's not that much to this game, but there's a surprising amount of meat to it. So if you're listening to the show and you want to follow Seto everywhere, you can also communicate with her. She'll be in the Left Behind Game Club Discord. You can show a little tag in there and be like, "You did a great job. Make sure to do that if you've made it this far." You can find that at leftbehindgame.club/discord. And then again, we're on Twitter at Left Behind Club. You can find me on the internet at Jacob McCourt on all major social media platforms, JACOBMCCOURT. I'm on TikTok making nonsense about blue EX boxes. I'm writing things. I'm doing video game trivia. So, I mean, the best place to find everything I'm doing is on Twitter. Flora, where can you be found?
I can be found on Twitter at LudoNarrativeFM. You can find me at epiloguegaming.com. And I will say, in addition to the Discord, you can also find me in Seto's Twitch chat sometimes. And, like, Seto's not bad at Overwatch. Don't be cool. Come join.
Yes.
This is a good time.
Love. Well, hey, that's our show. Mike's not here, so we will say shout out Mike Ruffalo, and that, my friends, is one less game left behind.
Do you find yourself playing older games and wishing that there were new discussions about those games? Enter Tales from the Backlog. Hi, I'm Dave Jackson, and on each episode, I'm joined by a guest to break down those games that may be stuck in your ever-expanding backlog. Each episode looks at one game in depth, focusing on mechanics, story, music, and other aspects with no spoilers until a clearly marked spoiler wall in the middle. If you've played the game, go ahead and climb that spoiler wall and enjoy in-depth story discussions, and if not, jump out when we warn you and maybe go play that game for yourself. We have over 100 episodes in the feed, everything from Disco Elysium to Tunic to discussion episodes about how to get into horror games, and if games actually need to be fun, or if they have more to offer. I guarantee that there's something in there for everybody. Once again, that's Tales from the Backlog, available wherever your podcasts are found.
Video games are a unique medium.
They can tell stories,
Immerse us in strange, fantastic worlds.
blur the very boundaries of our reality.
But at the end of the day, video games are fun. Whatever fun is to you.
I'm Jeff Moonen,
And I am Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
and on Fun and Games, we talk about the history, trends, and community of video games.
It's a celebration of all the games we play and all the fun we find within them.
And there's so many more games out there, so we hope you'll share in that conversation with us.
Fun and Games podcast with Matt and Jeff. Find us on certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
And happy gaming.